seminar this morning. So as you just heard, we are recording this. So we record this just for the speaker, though. We're not going to share the recording with anyone else. This is just to give feedback to the speaker, and so she has a permanent record of the feedback that she gets during her seminar. So briefly, for those of you who haven't been to one of these before, the purpose of the Junior Faculty Seminar Series is for a junior faculty member to present unpublished work, an idea for a manuscript or an idea for a grant proposal, something like this, so that they can get feedback from peers and experts. So I'd like to thank the visitors who have joined us from Duke University. We really appreciate you being here, especially it's the evening in Duke. And I'd like to tell everybody that please give Xin lots of feedback. That's the purpose of this, right? She's not shy, she can handle criticism, and constructive criticism is helpful to her. So the more constructive criticism and the better the feedback she gets, the better this is for her. So I'll go ahead and introduce Xin. Xin Tong is an assistant professor of computation and design at DKU, and she's going to talk to us today about a fascinating topic. Actually, I can't wait to hear about this. Digital and virtual reality games facilitating social skills, particularly in children with autism. So Xin, take it away. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for the great introduction. So I'm going to share my screen and get started. Can you guys all see my screen? Everything good? Okay, cool. So good morning, good evening. Thank you everyone so much for making time and attend this talk. As Kathy already introduced, my name is Xin, and today I'll be introducing a more recent track of my research about designing games for fostering social collaboration of autistic children. Okay, to start with, let me introduce a little bit about my background. I joined DKU fairly recently. Before that, I received a PhD degree in Human-Computer Interaction, HCI, from Sam Fraser University in Canada. And then I did a very short postdoc fellowship in Stanford University. So my work falls under an interdisciplinary research field, HCI, with computation background. My primary research interest is to design and develop interactive and intelligent systems for health, well-being, and social good purposes. Technologies included virtual reality, games, machine learning, and AI stuff. So for most of my project, I adopt the research through design approach, which is an iterative process of design and research. The process starts from identifying a real-life problem or research gap, and then involving targeted populations in the design and test process, and finally develop new research questions or possible directions. So to begin with, I want to give you a few examples about the kind of work I've done in the past. So here are a few virtual reality projects. I have worked with chronic pain clinicians and patients and created several VR virtual reality environments for patients to self-manage their pain based on pain distraction and embodiment theories. I've also implemented games, VR games, for facilitating physical activities. These pictures here show an arthritis patient interacting and performing Tai Chi and yoga movements in the game, which are also integrated as part of the gameplay. So finally, I've also designed several embodied VR environments that allow people to stay in the avatar of another person, another vulnerable population, so they could better empathize with their situation. So hopefully reducing potential implicit biases. Furthermore, I've also investigated how to deploy AI algorithms or machine learning models to support sensing, detecting, and predicting one's well-being conditions, such as stress levels, using biomarkers like skin responses, heart rate variability, etc. And also behaviors by providing, for this one, it was a browser-based stress intervention. So you may ask, why start an autism project? And what has this to do with all the rest of my work? All of this was motivated by an unexpected visit to a very special education center in China a few years ago, where I saw and met thousands and hundreds of autistic children getting special trainings from what so-called special education teachers. Unlike the rich resources autistic children can get in Canada or the States, these children here in China don't get enough support. And it's even true until today. So in fact, some of the children has been considered to be mental or intellectual disabled, handicapped, rather than being diagnosed with autism. Their parents usually don't know what to do with that. So this situation made me to wonder, what is the biggest challenges for them in life? How can I help them? So next, I want to start with defining what is autistic children and how are they different. So speaking of autism, there are many very classic movie characters you can probably imagine. For me, I think of Sheldon Cooper. So who is highly intelligent, has unique interests, but could not read or understand some social cues. Our the main character Raymond from Rayman. But there are also other types of autistic people with lower intellectual quality, like this is Da Fu from a Chinese movie, who cannot dress up himself, cannot cook, cannot control body movement, and has this unexpected shakes every now and then. So you can see that their intellectual quality, along with other skills, differs in a wide range. So that's why psychologists name this autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, has been defined as a very complex neurological disorder with symptoms which can seriously affect their social capacities, including verbal and nonverbal communications. So recent years, some researchers also changed the naming, the terms from disorder to diversity to acknowledge the diverse neuron biological pathways in our brain. And even in China, scholars are changing the name from 自闭症 to 孤独症. That means self-closure, like an emotional problem, to lonely people group, to address diversity. So people in one end of the spectrum, like we said earlier, like Sheldon, they are usually called high functioning autism. They have close to normal or higher IQ. Sometimes they are exceptional talented, and then they can also develop normal language. However, they still experience both people in both ends of the spectrum. They still experience different levels of social impairment, such as understanding social cues, facial expressions, body languages, and can efficiently perform social interactions with other people, like sharing, turn taking, initiating, or being engaged in conversations. So to support their social collaboration skills, researchers have been developing different kinds of therapies and interventions. So in my work, I'll focus on digital therapies and more specifically game interventions. Prior research suggests that autistic children love to interact with computer tasks and games, and they are highly motivated to do so because of two primary reasons. So first, games, computer tasks are more stable, predictable, and they are clearly defined compared to real life chaos. And second, those tasks and games are less sensory distractive compared to what's going on in real life where they receive multi-sensory input. So here I put some examples for the games that have been tested and developed. So most of these games, as you can see, they are tabletop, or they use a specific motion capture equipment, and maybe they are just for in-lab testing. So it's not accessible to use at home. It requires device and a complicated setup. Also, the content, the gameplay itself is quite fixed in one scenario. So I want to talk about a little bit about Outcraft here, which is a dedicated Minecraft server with only autistic children inside. I hope you all heard about Minecraft. It's really popular among kids these days. As we mentioned earlier, most of those are research-based, and then they are developed as research prototypes. Outcraft is the other way around. It comes out first, and then researchers, they have conducted ethnographic research, observing, hiding in the population, in the player groups, and observing what's going on inside the community. So in short, Minecraft-based game is more like online social scenarios, and that's more accessible at home settings. It has a larger community of different social groups, and players can play and interact with the game freely without any restriction. So that's how Minecraft inspired my first pilot work in autism. However, prior researchers, they only conducted observation studies to learn the behaviors, but there are no particular social gameplay designed to facilitate behaviors. It's more like an open world play game. So to better understand its potential, its efficiency and effectiveness, we deployed a dedicated server and languages in Chinese. We named it Freedom Town. So in Freedom Town, besides free play work, children can also do some other, we implemented some mandatory tasks, and then they have different task work, so it's more focused. We also designed what we call meditation rooms. It's like the sensory rooms in real life for children to calm themselves down when necessary. So we run some pilot tests for the Freedom Town game setup. And it's done in 2 phases. In phase 1, we did a 3-day focus group with 6 high-functioning children, autism children, and their parents and teachers. So basically delivered the tutorials and taught them how to play. In the focus group, they did some co-creation tasks with their partners. And this was originated from Lego therapies, where one of the kid they has the map or the menu, and the other kid, they have the building resources, and they need to collaborate together. And later on, we followed up for 20 weeks in the wild, which means they play at their own home, and then we do only online trackings. So we did 6 centralized online group sessions, and they are also allowed to freely explore outside the research time. There are more mandatory tasks opened at that point, so they can farm, mining, breeding animals, fighting monsters. At that time, we measured some autistic scales and also behavioral tests. We also conducted interviews in the very end of these 20 weeks. What do we find? We observed positive changes from the test. I'm not going to explain what the test is going to take so much time, and also from the parent interviews. But I saw about their general behaviors. For instance, they talked more frequently offline with the other children because they attend to the same special education school. Parents also give many helpful suggestions for us to iterate and redesign some of the game mandatory collaborative tasks, like the difficulty they responded. The children needs adults' guidance is to understand what's going on most of the time. Especially there is a long learning curve in the first few weeks, and the gameplay is a bit difficult for them. So most importantly, the world has many components and kids can be easily distracted to other stuff. For instance, maybe there are sea or different plants, and then the child will be easily distracted and focus their attention on one of the objects. The limitations of this work, there are problems for attracting attentions and how maintain it in the tasks, in the collaborative tasks. And also we find even laptops are not fully accessible for all the families. They need to sometimes borrow it or share it with other people. And the social behaviors are still too general. It's more like what they have in everyday life, but not specific trained behaviors like sharing actions or maybe initiating conversation actions or maybe turn taking. So that's some of the limitations that we observed. We also received design applications. So to be short, we draw the conclusion of this design suggestions for developing simple environment with more task-oriented directions for autistic children. Integrate specific social skills and give them an easy beginning to get started. Also, we found we need to get more quantified measures of collaboration, because right now it's talking responded generally by parents from the interviews, and there are not any existed psychological scales that can measure in-game collaboration. Last, mobile devices are more preferable for parents to use at home. So those design implications lead us to the second effort, and which is iPad game that we further developed and simplified compared to the 3D Minecraft world, and we call it Star Rescue. So the background is where the kids need to rescue the monsters and have their rocket ship get launched. So we further investigated the collaboration patterns of theories, and based on Miraya's work, we mapped the in-game behaviors or mechanics with different stages of collaboration to gradually develop their collaborative behaviors. So the first step Maria suggested is to learn for the children to learn when and how to execute their own task, and then recognize their roles. So after that, cooperate in simultaneously actions to achieve goals. And then allow them to collaborate in a free interaction, which is interact without assigned roles or partners, so they can have this free interaction. In Minecraft project, we directly entered to the last stage without building up this patterns gradually from the beginning. So based on that theory, we further developed new iPad 2D games, and we addressed those three different characteristics or qualities in the game mechanics. So the first one is turn taking. In the game, we give, and this is an iPad setting, so each player gets a half of the screen. And they also have different roles to play. We designed or implemented some superpowers, like superheroes powers in the later levels. So they each take a perspective, and then they need to collaborate with each other to achieve the game goals. And finally, we implemented a co-collection reward system. So they need to, this goal is to initiate their conversations. So they need to discuss and negotiate what to collect and how to organize their collection. And this game is originated from a very classic, the first video game, which is called Pong. So instead of competition, we changed the setting to collaboration. So they are working towards the same goal instead of winning the game by on their own. So here is the design research process. We first formulate the game ideas based on prior literature and also interviews with parents. After building the minimum viable prototype, we further again tested. We showed that and have parents and teachers play that and introduced concepts, collected feedback, and reiterated the game for the second time. So next, I want to show the few iterative process and can see how things changed with the stakeholders, key stakeholders get involved in this design research. And later on, I'll talk about how we evaluated this game in a more scientific setting. So here are some iterations from the beginning concepts gradually till the end. And we, based on the feedback we get from parents. So for instance, they need to, in the very beginning, is more flexible. They can go everywhere in the screen. And in the end, they each take half of the screen. So this is one of the example how things changed and design features evolved based on feedback. This is the final version that we tested. So in the first level is practice, single player practice mode. And in the, let me put my mouse here. So in this picture is the first level. Two players, they need to catch the ball and throw it to the other players to eliminate the monsters. And later on, there are more difficult features like the superpowers and the reward system right there. So we conducted 3-day test. The entire study lasts for 12 days. And this happened this summer in Qingdao in China. So in the pre-test and post-test, we both measured their fine motor skills because in the Minecraft test, we find hand-eye coordination is a big problem for these children as well, even they're high functioning. We also measured the anticipations, parents and teachers' anticipations from interviews and theory of mind test as to test their mind of thinking in the other perspectives. So it's a behavioral test. So each day they come for 1 hour and then they play with a pair. So we recruited 36 children in total. And they're from 5 to 8 years old. In the experimental group, they play in pairs, and in the control group, they don't get any games. They just come for the pre and post tests. So here are the findings from the experimental groups. As you can see, their collaboration did happen as we expected. And there are good moments where they give high fives to each other. This is very rarely seen according to parents and teachers when they achieve a certain level or catch a very like the boss monster. However, there are also the challenging times where they don't collaborate effectively with each other. For instance, in this picture here, the children are trying to push away the other kid so he can take control of the entire screen. So I do have some videos. Let's take a look at a short video. Take a look at each of them. So this is the high five one. They were talking about how to plan for the next level. So see that child is trying to be dominant in the gameplay and don't let the other kids to play. So this is more some other unexpected moments where unexpected issues happen. So they were trying to, one of the children was trying to quit the game, and he doesn't want to play. So there are all kind of things occurred during the playtest. Sorry about this. Okay, so we observed different hands behaviors and coded the hands behaviors into different categories. So this is more a quantified approach to evaluate how effectively they collaborated. And the most primary source here is to understand their hands behaviors, because that's where the most interactions happened. We further analyzed their verbal and other behaviors. So including the facial ones, and try to analyze if they can match with each other. And also, for instance, if they are cheering, laughing, shouting, crying, etc. So we analyze that as well. So to get a more quantified way and measure the outcomes. Here are some quick findings about the game usability compared to the Minecraft one. Based on parents' feedback, it's easier to learn, fun to engage, and the difficulty levels ramps up gradually, so that's more appropriate. Also, we observed better in-game performances across 3 days, such as the continuously hit on this ball or catch on the ball, and the theory of mind has significantly increased from ANOVA tests. And also we observed significant increased turn-taking skills as well. As very happy side effect, they also have increased hand-eye coordination and fine motor tasks abilities from pre-post comparison. However, we find some kids doesn't like the theme, the star rescue theme, and that matters. We didn't measure its transferability from the game scenario to the real life scenario, and this can be done in a more longitudinal settings to wash out or to eliminate the potential novelty effect. Some parents also suggested instead of a single just play, also integrate some educational purposes or real life scenarios. So future work, we'd like to further iterate the gameplay based on the feedback collected and further test 2 different types of collaborations, synchronous play versus asynchronous collaboration. We find that in the setting, the Star Rescue second project, we find that it's very interesting how our children can react differently when the task occurred. I asked them to do the same task in the same time versus they each take a part of the role in the task separately. So we want to further investigate how that affects the final outcomes. We want to publish the game, for instance, to Apple Store, and so that they can access and play it in their own home in the wild. And we want to further collect more like audiovisual input data to further coding and analyzing their collaboration skills. So hopefully this model can also be generalized to other gameplays, because that's the key issue for most of the digital games developed these days. It's hard to quantify the socialization measurements. And finally, design studies or method to measure the transferability of the study effect. So what's next step to conclude? Besides, this might be a bit overwhelming, but this is something I want to do in the future. So I find that besides language part, the key underlying key problem is their affective or emotional regulation, reflection management. So in the future, I'd like to further working on the game side, but then try to detect their emotions with the support from a virtual agent. I like to help or support children to review their recorded, for instance, in-game recorded behaviors and understand or reflect on their behaviors to promote a better self-emotional or behavioral regulation. So finally, takeaways. Social games for children with autism in general, from my 2 work and the prior work, it does have great potentials in supporting different kinds of social collaborations. But the collaboration tabs should be further specified and customized in the gameplay. And we found that by dissecting the collaboration into the 4 patterns, or map that to the 4 patterns, it helped us to better design the game. And finally, there are still much work remain under investigated, like the transferability and longitudinal effect. All right, so that's all for my presentation today. In the end, I want to thank DKU Faculty of Arts again, especially Kathy and Elaine for organizing this, and also thank everyone from Duke and DKU. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Xin. That was really interesting. So I'm going to open it up to the floor right now. I'd like to give priority to visitors from Duke, since you can talk to your colleagues here more easily. So would anyone from Duke like to say something or ask a question at this stage? Victoria, I see your hand up there. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to turn it off now. Hi, yes, this is great. Thank you so much. It's really interesting to learn more about your work. I had sort of 2 questions that were circulating in my mind as I was listening. One was a very foundational question of how much do you need to create a customized system versus interacting with an already existing game in a structured way? Because there's so much work that goes into creating these environments, and I share your interest in doing it. So it's not saying that it's not valuable, but there's also so much labor, so much time, so much energy, so much programming. Could you use an existing board game, or could do more with Minecraft? Can you say more about how you got to this point where you feel like this is the way to go?
Thank you for this awesome question, Victoria. And that's also how I kind of scaffolded the research process. The beginning motivation to start with Minecraft is where we think that those prototypes, research games, cost labors, and it's like I mentioned earlier, one-time thing. But we find that in Minecraft, when there is no constraint, free play, is really hard to provide specific training or provide specific social skills. It's more in general building a community, a friendly community for the autistic children or people to interact with each other, but they don't learn from that or improve their social behaviors. There are values to develop the specialized or customized games. However, like also I said earlier in the slides, there are difficulties in its accessibility, etc. And also even for our game, Star Rescue, we spend lots of time to iterate the design and get where we are right now. And we're still trying to polish that. But this is definitely something worth doing to give the children and parents something to start with, get practice, especially at home, as our ultimate goal isn't just publishing research papers, but also to really create meaningful and applicational work. So that's one aspect to think about that. The second aspect is through this design research process, we do learn a lot more by engaging and involving stakeholders like parents and teachers in the stage. And we realized, and that's also part of the reason why I proposed in the very end the virtual agent future idea. So with the help of this agent, it's more like your Siri voice assistant, and it's once we can implement this one single model in the very beginning, instead of designing different game features or details, we could have children interact with the agent in a more meaningful and realistic way to improve their social behaviors, and that's more real life oriented, and that's also more transferable. There are also work done in that area of conversational agent for autism children, but I'm thinking to focus on more on the affective or emotional aspect of things. I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
I know you did, and I have other questions, but I don't want to take up all the airtime if there's others who want to ask something.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay, well, so another question I had was about these the measures of anticipation and theory of mind that you mentioned. I was just trying to understand exactly what they were. Can you just elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't leave time to that because it's a little bit complicated to talk about. So theory of mind is very classic test to understand the ability of thinking in the shoes of others. And this test has been conducted primarily with autistic children. So there are some mini tasks or tests in this big setting. So I'll give one test as an example here. For instance, one is to so one task is to have these figures or pictures show the autistic children, and it's very interesting. So you hide something in, like, there is maybe a candy figure. I'll just make it simple and give some like concrete examples. So maybe you have a candy thing, a candy picture, and you hide it. There are two figures to start with, a bear and a rabbit. And then the bear leave the room, so there's only rabbit remain. And you want you tell the kids, you move the bear's candy from his box to the rabbit's box, and then you ask the child, where when the bear come back to the room, what do you think a bear where is the bear going to find his candy, from his box or the rabbit's box? So this is a very representative type of test to understand how they can put in the mind of the other person instead of an observer. And this has been validated with both TD, typical developed children, and ASD children, and they found very significant differences. So TD children would think that the bear still look for the candy in the bear's box because he doesn't know, the bear doesn't know. But then autism children will tell you the bear will find it in the rabbit box. So there are many simple, very similar and simple tests like this one. For the other test, I put summarized word there, but there are different scales for the parents to like self-reported scales for the parents to fill out, such as their social behaviors in different aspects, maybe conversations, maybe communication. So there are different self-reported scales in that, which I only used the word here to represent that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm not seeing any raised hands right now, but I have a question. So it was obvious that the children were interacting with each other while they were playing the game, and I think that's a little bit unusual for autistic children. But I'm wondering if you plan to study what happens when you withdraw the game, will they continue to interact with each other, or are they going to be a little bit dependent on the game, or tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. That's also a great question to understand how long the effect lasts. So for the first project, Minecraft, we did follow 3 months. After that, 20 weeks since, we found that those children, when they paired up, they'll go to their partner's home to play together because it's easier to have in-person communication and interaction to discuss what to do in the game rather than using voice chat softwares. So they still do that. And even a few months ago, I still got a message from parents saying if they can still access to the server, because we did a maintenance and closed the server for some time to redesign all the tasks. So for the start rescue one, right after the 3-day study, the 3 times study is done, parent come to the researcher in my group saying that, can I copy that game to my iPad to play with my my child at home? So that's something I heard from the parents.
Okay, thanks. So there's a question in the chat. Lu Yao says her audio is not working very well, so I'll just read her question out. She's interested in what software you use to program the game, how you collect and store and analyze the data. Did you need IRB approval to do the study? I assume the answer is
yeah, definitely. We need IRB to conduct the study.
So could you say something a little bit about the software, and then we'll move
Definitely.
to Nathan?
Sure. So the software we use is called Unity. So it's a very popular game engine these days. You can also look out Unreal. They are kind of competitors. So how I collect, store, analyze data. We use okay, here is what we say in the IRB. We use a password protected device that's owned by the research facility or institution, where we store the in-game data, like for instance, how many times they clicked something or their successful rate, the performances in the game. So that's how we collected the in-game data. And at the very end, we export that data out from the iPad. So it's all stored locally. We didn't use any cloud services, although you can do that, but it's a bit complicated for the data management. I also use OpenAI program about, I'm curious about, yeah, I hope I answered. You are also coding observational video. Yes, Victoria, that's yes. So in the very beginning, we manually looked at a few videos trying to understand what behaviors emerged and then annotated that. So right now we're trying to use some models to give us the answers directly. It's going to take too much labor to coding all this. Like we have altogether probably 30 days, or maybe a bit less than that. 30 days multiplied 24 hours per day. We have very long time videos.
Okay, thanks. Nathan.
Thank you so much, Xin. That's been really fascinating. And I'd love to see video games be deployed in this way. Not too surprising that they should have such benefits in light of them addressing or actually attending to various questions, including special needs and disabilities already. My question has to do with the more specifically AR and conceivably VR versions of such games, since I imagine that the one that you're working with right now could just be iPad. I'm curious about whether from your own research or from other research you have a sense of which modalities, so to speak, would be the most promising, whether say auditory or visual AR might be more suitable, or whether it's circumstance and game dependent or task dependent, and whether you could say maybe a little bit more about VR types of scenario that you would imagine that might be again distinctive compared to either of these options so far. Thanks so much. It's been really fascinating.
Thank you for this inspiring questions, Nathan. I guess I'll answer one by one. The ones I can still remember. So what's going on in the VR or AR games for creative autistic children? So most of the virtual reality games, they follow something called exposure therapy. So they expose the child, the players in a very like immersive simulated environment to get them trained. For instance, how to recognize facial expressions. That's a very simple example. Or maybe a more complicated concept, how to manage their anxiety when they are lost in the street. So this is the type of work use VR, and they actually implement the exposure therapies inside. So for the augmented reality works, is more what's happening in the iPhone. Sorry, let me just finish with the VR part. It's not popular because of the setup, and also the headset is pricey and not easy to set up for parents. So it's not very popular these days. So the other types of VR that also includes, so for instance, different training scenarios. So for instance, they deliver certain conversations and the kids learn how to respond to that conversation. That's kind of, well, it's, I guess it also belongs to exposure, but it's more the aim. It aims at training specific social skills. So that's pretty much about VR. As for augmented reality, it's more in the cell phone. So I haven't read lots of work done in augmented set. Again, for the same similar purposes like facial expressions. But I'd imagine to the also for the modality questions, a speech is always the most traditional and popular ways for the children to learn or interact with the virtual agent. Virtual agent doesn't necessary to happen inside a virtual reality setting. It can just be a virtual figure in your cell phone. So speech has been used in the past, like a chatbot, a text window where you tap in all the ideas there. More recent years, it emerged with more facial aspects, 3D figures, along with their speeches. So children was trying to get this integrated multisensory input, so they can better comprehend some social skills. So did I answer all of the questions?
You did. Thank you so much. I would love to continue the conversation at another time.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Nathan. So there's a couple of things in the chat. Luya's interested in talking to you about NFT and metaverse games after this. So if you haven't met Luya, I'll introduce you to her. Victoria's suggesting you could use facial recognition systems to track emotion. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I plan in the very end for the virtual agent. Thank you so much for this comment. Yeah, based on the camera and also the bio part, like more multi-sensory input system to evaluate the affective space.
Great. I have another question. So I see that you're recording hand movements, hand position, and also you're recording verbal comments from the children. And this is like, I don't know much about psychology or games, but I teach animal behavior, and this looks like a very classical, ethogram recording behaviors in animals. Are you going to attempt to quantify that though, in some way, and do statistical analysis to make that a little bit stronger, more than just a qualitative observation?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, we were trying to observe and make notes, like manually analyze what's going on. So we use that to code or generate the codes, and we use the codes to go back, revisit the video or the audio, and make annotations. So with those annotations, we feed it into the kind of the machine learning algorithm to quantify, for instance, frequencies, if that behavior happens or not, how many times it happened, at what point it happens, are the audio part match or can be integrated with the visual part. So that's the kind of things we are trying to analyze right now. We haven't got the outcomes yet. It takes some time to annotate and code the behaviors. So yeah, we should be able to get the quantified outcomes very, very soon.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I think typical things that animal behaviorists look at are frequency and also duration of responses is another very useful measure. Yeah, great. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
Any other comments or questions for Xin from the audience? Victoria, your hand's up again, I see.
Yeah, I was just thinking about these virtual agents and what kinds of interactions you're imagining. I think you said something in your slide about responding to events, emotional events. Are you thinking of it as a journaling sort of tool, or almost a self-therapy kind of tool or something like that?
Yeah, it's a great research direction to think about. Right now, I'm thinking to frame it or develop it more like a self management tool where they can learn self-taught and self-reflect. So this is what especially the high functioning autism group can learn or get best out of the applications. Yeah, that's what any other suggestions you may have for this possible research direction?
Well, I was just thinking about how I've been hearing increasingly about chatbots being used in therapy, and coupled with what you said before, psychological therapy, and coupled with what you said before about many autistic individuals enjoying working within computational environments and maybe being more comfortable talking to the computer than to another human in some ways. I'm just wondering if there's something that can be done there that helps them to manage their own emotions and feelings as they go through life, and could it be used as a therapeutic tool of some kind in that way?
Yeah, definitely. We need to bring in more expert, our therapist inside here to better incorporate therapies, all the components from therapy. Thank you for that great suggestion.
It's always fun to come up with ideas for somebody else to implement.
Sure.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions or thoughts about where Xin could take this next, or any suggestions for her, or any other ideas for her in the audience?
I'm just going to jump in here really quick. First, thank you, Xin. I have to run to another meeting, but actually both Kathy and Victoria hit on a lot of the same topics that I'm thinking about when you're discussing this. I'm really interested in the idea of kind of AI agents or built-in. One of the things we can do within VR and games at this point is, we can really start to build in these agents or different type of helping mechanisms. Just thinking about utilizing, incentive-based mechanics and things like that to be able to really, do approach things in a way that we can't do it necessarily in reality. One of the things I keep thinking about with a different research project that we're working on that about already, so I won't take up too much time. But like if you had a classroom and you wanted to develop some form of kind of incentive-based participation model, you would need like an extra faculty or somebody sitting next to you to do the scoring and to do all this other extra work. Now within a VR environment or within another environment, we can actually just program that. So that's actually part of the actual experience. So I'm really curious as to how, if you're interested in doing more of those types of experiments, because if it's metaverse, omniverse, or whatever verse we want to call it, and everything like that, we actually have the tools to be able to build these things. And I think rethinking kind of from ground up based off of design and participation models, becomes a whole new way of being able to look at a lot of these things. And also just bouncing off of like hand tracking or motion tracking in general. There's a lot that can be done now, and I know Ming Lee is doing stuff in that area. Sean and social science is doing a lot of stuff in that area. We're getting a motion tracking system soon, so there's some abilities here that we can play with. So, but yeah, thank you. This was really great.
Thank you for the brilliant suggestion. Yeah, that's also definitely something I plan to do next, to give it the virtual agent or virtual assistant perceptual model to react, and then for different purposes. Here in this case is more autistic, therapeutic, emotion regulation purposes. Thank you so much, Ben.
Okay, we have a few minutes left if anyone would like to add anything. Okay, it doesn't look like it. So in that case, thank you very much, Xin. That was really interesting. Thank you to everybody for joining us today and for providing Xin with some thoughts, some feedback. I'm sure they're extremely helpful, and it was very interesting to hear about your work, Xin. Okay,
thank you so much for this great chance. Thank you so much. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kathy.